Welcome to our study on the book of Romans. This is Sonship Orientation, and this is session number 93. Now, at the end of our last session, we were over there looking at the church at Corinth, and we know that they had some problems. One of the things that was a problem for them is that they understood something I've been trying to get us to understand, and even though they didn't go into their sonship the way they should have at the first, they eventually do, but Paul has to write a letter to them to get that done. But part of the problem with the Corinthians is they had the idea that is preached so often today that if you serve God and you're really faithful, that there's a whole bunch of good stuff that's automatically going to happen to you. And they almost put themselves back under a performance type contract, if you understand that, this is the guarantee that, no bad things are going to happen to us. And then the Apostle Paul makes it very clear to them that if you're going to pursue your sonship, the policy of evil is going to crank up against you. And what you're really going to have, now you're equipped for it? Yes. You're told about it? Yes. And you're given everything you need to deal with it? Yes. And you're actually going to benefit out of it? Yes. But you're still going to go through that. And when they looked at him, and he detailed for them the things that was happening in his own life in conjunction with the attacks of the policy of evil, they decided, we don't want any of that. And so they backed off of that. Now, that's part of the problem of what's going on with them. But what I tried to make clear last time, and I'll just remind you of it today, they didn't stop church. They didn't quit assembling together. They didn't eliminate ministries. They didn't do that kind of a thing. They kept meeting together, and they kept doing all the things that, a church would do, except they did not pursue their sonship education. And that's why Paul writes to them and says, your meeting together is not for the better, it's for the worse. And he wasn't chiding them because they weren't having church. And so I'm saying that because sometimes people say, well, we go to church, but see, that just because you can say you go to church doesn't mean it's for the better. And Paul's making that clear. Okay, so now let's take that and let's put it on to us, because here's what we've been doing. We've been talking about, and I'm not going to fill all these in because you know them, but what we're going to do is we've been flying over the territory, so to speak, to look at these three levels of our education, and I've been just kind of showing you these ahead of time. And what we're doing is we're ending up phase 1 today. We're going to, in just a few minutes, we're going to be moving into phase 2 of level 2, and you're going to take a look at the things that are going to be happening to you over there. I'm talking about the good things that you're going to get as a son when you get into phase 2 of level 2. And the reason I say we're almost through is because when we get to level 3, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking to you about the things in level 3. They are out there, they're the furthest things out there, they're the most advanced things out there, and the more advanced this curriculum gets, the less that, unless you're going through it, the less you can really say about it that's going to make any sense anyway. It would be sort of like inviting a nuclear physicist in to talk to us about, his area of expertise, and, for me, a lot of what he would say would just, I'd be back getting me another bowl of ice cream because, I just wouldn't be getting much out of that. And the curriculum, just really good. And that's not anything about our IQ. That doesn't mean we're not smart. It just means that there's a whole lot of doctrine that has to be a foundation before you get over there. So we are going to look at some things over there with just what we can, what I think would be appropriate for us to do. Okay, now when you get into level 2, you understand that now at the end of this, you became a simple son, and now you're going through the thing to become a young man. And when you're finishing that up, you know that from the end of this one, all the way rest through your sonship life, the policy of evil knows who you are and has you in its sights. And what it is designed to do is to get you to quit your sonship life, to stop. And if you do, then whatever it's attacking you with will immediately go away. Because that's the goal. Now, as the policy of evil, you're advanced as a son in level 2, and as you're advancing, so does the policy of evil against you. It's going to advance as well. But now, in level 2, the policy of evil becomes much more subtle, much more cunning, much more crafty. You're going to need to be able to see below the surface about things that are going on. We've talked a good bit about that, but what we're about to do now is talk about a strategy that Satan is going to employ, that if he can't get you to quit your sonship life, then he has something else that he will do that will bring the same goal. Now, and I'm saying it that way for now. In just a minute, we're going to kind of pull the curtain back on that and take a look at it. But what he really wants to do is destroy the functional life of this church. That's what, and of every individual in it. When I say the functional life, in other words, he would be perfectly happy for us to meet together and, if I could say it this way, play church. He'd be perfectly happy for that to happen. But for real edification to take place, no. And so he has found a way that if you're not going to, see, and that's the thing we've emphasized up till now, because up till this point, all through level 1, the whole idea is to make you quit, make you quit, make you quit, make you quit. And if you settle that issue and you say, I'm not quitting, then he goes, okay, if you're not going to quit, I have another angle I can come at you with that you can continue to come every single time, and I'm still going to get what I want out of this. And so going to church, as my point is, just having church is not enough. It's not enough to just say we have church. It's what we're doing while we're there. And I think everybody kind of understands that point. And by the way, just ask yourself the question, and I know I posed it in the notes, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but when you talk about living out of your sanctified life, when you talk about living out of who you've been made to be in Jesus Christ, look at all the churches around and ask yourself how many folks are living out of who the Spirit has made them to be in Jesus Christ. And now you'll understand why there's no functional life in those. And Satan is perfectly happy for those to take place every single Sunday. Because all you do is you drive up, you go in, you hear it, you come out, you get in your car, and guess what? You feel pretty good because you punch the clock, right? And see, he's perfectly happy with that. All right. So the first goal of the policy of evil, folks, is not to destroy a church. The first goal of the policy of evil is not to keep you from going to church. In fact, the policy of evil has a religious aspect to it. It's fine for you to go to church. The first goal of the policy of evil is not to do away with all the trappings of the church. It loves that kind of stuff. It just wants to make sure that the church doesn't engage in two issues, right division and sonship education. If it can keep you away from those issues, then it's perfectly happy. And if you do learn to rightly divide, that's fine. It can live with that as long as you don't really get educated as sons. That's really where you've crossed the line. Because when you get educated as sons, you start moving through the curriculum. You want me to, look, I'm not being ugly. I'm not. I know now what I say here is going out to places I had no idea it would ever go. So I'm trying to be a little bit careful. But just a little. I'm trying to be a little bit careful here. Because, hey, I used to be in that other group. I understand this. But knowing about rightly dividing the Word does not put you in the education. It only sets you up so that you can get the education. Are you with me? It's kind of like this is the key to the door that leads to the education. There's a lot of grace churches in the country, and they all understand right division, but their understanding stops at right division. And so every week it's this: rightly divide the word. Paul is our apostle. And so, and that's where all the sermons go. And that's not wrong, it's just not enough. Are you with me? So the policy of evil is really, there is a general policy of evil that says, don't let right division be known. If you do know about it, when you get into sonship, right about here, and you know that's true, right about here, the policy of evil now becomes not general, but personal. Because now you're at a place in your sonship where you get noticed. Okay, now, with that in mind, what I want to do is, I want to take you back over to the book of Proverbs, and I want to show you the exhortations that belong to level 2, phase 1 and phase 2. And these are going to run in Proverbs chapter 6, and they're going to run starting in verse 20 all the way through chapter 8. Those are the exhortations in Israel's program that belong to the level 2 of their education. So here we go, Proverbs 6:20. My son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Bind them continually upon thine heart, and tie them about thy neck. When thou goest, it shall lead thee. When thou sleepest, it shall keep thee. And when thou awakest, it shall talk with thee. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life, to keep thee from the evil woman. And you know now who the evil woman is. Who is that? Evil woman is the policy of evil. Who's the world? I'm sorry, evil man. I'm sorry, that confused us, didn't it? I've even done that. I've called him the strange man and the evil woman, but really there is an evil woman reference, right? So, to keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of the strange woman. So here she is, and now verse 25, lust not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with thine eyelids. Now I'm going to just talk about that terminology for a moment. There are some things about the policy of evil, folks, that are very attractive. Things that are alluring. Things that would capture a person's imagination. Verse 26, for by means of a whorish woman a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. Now, we could talk about the details of this. That's really not what we're after here. What I'm trying to show you is that the allurements and the attractions of the policy of evil are going to be raised to a level that the son has never seen before when he gets into level 2. Remember, in level 1, you were told about the evil man and the strange woman. Now you're told about her in more detail, because the things that she's doing now have changed a little bit. And so as a result, when you get into the second part of level 2, you're going to be in Ephesians 6. And what are you told to do there? Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Because those wiles, by the way, that's not a general term. We want to use that. We see that in Ephesians 6, and we automatically want to talk about the devil is using wiles. He doesn't use wiles until you become a level 2 son. Because wiles is not just some generic term that you put on every attack of the adversary. What you're going to see is that a wile is a very carefully crafted deceit. It is meant to beguile you and to throw your thinking about identifying it for what it is off, so that you don't see it for what it is. What are you saying, a trap? Yeah, it is going to ensnare you, it's going to trap you, and it'll do it, hopefully, the whole idea of a wile is it does it without you knowing you're walking into a trap. That's the cleverness and the subtlety of the policy of evil. And that's why we're going over this here in level 2. Well, there's something that I want to show you, and by the way, the things that are written in Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians are talking about that very issue, about the ramped up policy of evil. Now, there's something that I want to take you to in the book of Philippians, and I'm looking, and that's not going to be my next reference, and I don't know why I put that off. I guess, okay, I do know why I put that off. I am going to take you in a moment to the book of Philippians and show you something about what you're going to be told in the level 2 education about how to deal with that. But before we do that, let me make this point. Now you're about to be introduced to this other angle of attack that the policy of evil is going to take. Remember, originally it's trying to get you to quit your sonship. If it's unsuccessful in that, let me just pause. I'm going to come back to that statement. Do you remember back years ago when we did the study on our ambassadorship, and I told you there's 3 phases of the attack against your ambassadorship? Does anybody remember what those are? Attack the message, and when that doesn't work, what's next? Attack the messenger, and what's the third one? Discredit the messenger. And you know what? Each of those come because of the failure of the previous attack. In other words, if attack the message works, it's all over. But if you're not going to change the message, then it's attack the messenger. Make you throw in the towel. If you're not going to throw in the towel, now it's discredit the messenger so that anybody that hears you won't pay any attention to you. So see, that's a very clever way to do it. Well, just in the same way, while the original attack here is to get you to quit, if you say, I see what this is, I'm not quitting, then the policy of evil comes along and says, there's something else that I want, that it's going to produce that will give Satan the same result as if you quit, even though you didn't. I'm trying to set this up so that you'll see I'm going to try to explain it this way. For most people, Sunday is about going to church. We've talked about that. And you kind of grow up with that. We go to church. But when you find out that church is supposed to be doing something very specific, all of a sudden, church changes. It's because for most people, let's face it, most of our lives when we went to church, if we missed on any given Sunday, it really didn't matter, did it? I mean, we acted like it did because we knew we were supposed to, but the real truth of the matter is, if we missed that sermon, there probably wasn't anything we were going to do that week that sermon would have impacted anyway, right? So while we wanted it to be a big deal and we believed it ought to be a big deal, the truth of the matter is it wasn't a big deal. We just kind of acted that way because that's what we understood we were supposed to do. What we were missing is what actually did make it a big deal. Okay, now with that in mind, see, we had one way of looking at it before, and then when you learn what's really going on there, you go, oh, you know what? This changes everything for me. All right, in that same way, when you're looking at what it is God is doing with you now as a son, I really hope I can tie this illustration together for you here. When you look at what God is doing with you now, you have an idea of what that is. And you think about it this way. I am going to the heavenly places. I am going to do some things up there. I am going to sit in a seat of authority. I am going to judge some things. I am going to rule over some things. He wants to educate me to do that. That's all right. And we're supposed to understand that first and foremost. That's the way the education goes. But let me just tell you now there is something way bigger than that that's behind all of this. That's really what we're going to be talking about today in both sessions. There is something way bigger than that that would almost equate that to, I'm going to church. Because when you find out the bigger issue behind it, then your sonship, yes, all those things are right and true, and they're supposed to be in your thinking, but there is a much bigger issue at stake here. There's more hanging in the balance than just that. And so I guess I'm going to try to say it one other way. There is more here than just you getting an education. And in level 2, you're going to be exposed to doctrine that tells you about that and clues you in that suddenly now, wait a minute, this thing is way bigger and way more involved, and it's not just what it does for me. This thing is much more complex than that. Now, I know I'm saying it that way for now, but because there is a bigger issue behind it all, and Satan knows what that issue is, he has devised a very precise attack that works to thwart that bigger issue, even if you don't quit your sonship. It produces the same end result as far as what God says is the big issue that's behind all of this, the big issue to Him. And by the way, we won't be given the doctrine to think that until we get into level 2. Because you have to have something in level 1 that actually gets you going. And then he comes along and says, now I need to pull the curtain back and show you the big issue here. And then when you look at that, you'll go, wow, that is way more than I thought. And Satan knows what the real, I don't want to, like the others, not real. He knows what the main issue is. That all this other that we understand is only the things that allow us to understand it. It's what leads up. Karen?
Kind of like what you're saying, the more we know, the more responsibility we take on.
Okay, well that would be true. The more you know, the more, yes, that is going to be true in a big, big way. In fact, that's why in level 2, phase 2, knowledge and discretion, that discretion plays right into that. But this issue, yeah, Linda? Yes.
Then the people that are in that, they think, okay, well, this is it. But you're going, no, there's so much more. Well, then when they learn about sonship, it's more and more every time. Exactly.
So what I'm saying is, we're being educated to go up to heavenly places and sit in seats of authority and govern the creature. That's like discovering right division. Because there's an issue that's so much bigger than that. Now, does that mean that first issue is not important? Well, it's essential. You've got to have it. But it's not the main issue. Now, because of that, now I haven't yet told you what that is. I will today. But what I'm trying to show you now is Karen went, thank you, because you know that she was thinking I was going to hang you out to dry on that. The thing I'm trying to show you here is because the policy of evil knows that big issue, isn't it getting you to quit is not just about getting you to quit. It's really about keeping you from that big issue. So the easiest way to do that is to get you to throw in the towel on sonship and walk away and go play church somewhere. Because what it's really concerned with is this issue. If you don't quit, it says, I can still affect the big issue. And here it comes. And Paul is going to talk to, By the way, you're going to see this back in the book. We're going to see it in Philippians, but I want to show it to you because that's not the first place it shows up. It actually shows up in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So we have a pretty lengthy passage here. I'm going to take you through it on the PowerPoint. Starting in verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud and passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual, look at that, capital R rock. Who is that? You know who that is. That followed them, and that rock was Christ. But with many of them God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Neither let, by the way, there's a whole lot here, too much for us to talk to, or I'll take the whole session doing it. But just take a look at this. I'm back you up to verse 6. It says that our examples, that we should not lust after evil things. Verse 7, neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written. And you know what you expect to follow? That they made graven images and bowed down to them. Isn't that what you think of when you think of idolatry? That's not what it said. What did it say? It said they sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. Kind of expands your view of idolatry, doesn't it? Anyway, there's something in there. I just mentioned that to you. Verse 8. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. Here's the one I'm after. He's given you a whole list of them here. Neither let us tempt Christ. Now, when you say that, the first thing you've got to ask yourself is what? Huh? What do you have to ask? What naturally comes into your mind? If the Apostle Paul stood up here and said, do not tempt Christ, you know what I'd be thinking? I'd be asking, how do I do that? So I can make sure I don't do it. Right? Neither let us tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed of serpents. Do you remember that thing? The serpents, they had to make the brass serpent on the pole and hold it up. And if you're ever bitten by a serpent, you looked on the serpent on the pole and you were able to live. Remember that deal? Well, that came because they tempted Christ. But now he's going to expand on that for you, because that is the question. How in the world would you do that? So let's keep reading verse 10. Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer. So those that tempted Christ were destroyed of serpents. Those that murmured were destroyed of the destroyer. And it says, now all these things happened unto them for ensamples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Now, just to remind you of an ensample is something that it has other aspects to it, but if you ignore it, it is to your own peril. In other words, there's something carefully given to you there that you're supposed to pay attention to. So here's the two things that we're after out of this passage. Tempt Christ and murmur. Somebody give me another name for murmur. Yeah, complain. Now, that doesn't seem like a big deal. In other words, when you look at that and you say, so what Paul is saying is, don't be murmuring and complaining. Let's take that one for example. Well, I understand God doesn't want us to murmur and complain. But listen, this is not talking about general complaining. Now, if you want to do the general complaining, I guess that's going to be a sonship decision. But this is not talking about that. This is not talking about, man, did you see the price of gas? This is not about, man, grocery prices really went up. It's not about complaining because, you know, Randall and Beverly quit bringing vegetables up here. It's not complaining about the things of life. What is this murmuring and complaining in the context of? Huh? Well, no. No, it's not against God. It is in the context. You're going to see this. The sufferings of Christ. Tell me, what are the sufferings of Christ? That is the suffering that we do under the policy of evil. That is suffering solely because of our sonship. Remember, the original attacks of the policy of evil, the sufferings of Christ, are meant to make you do what? In the beginning, to quit. When the policy of evil sees you're not going to quit, it shifts and it says, now what I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to get you to start complaining and murmuring about suffering under the policy of evil. That's why it's not about, I'm complaining because it's not raining or that kind of business. That's not it. This is somebody in level 2 of their sonship that is being directly attacked by the policy of evil, and they're not going to quit, but this attack is geared, and they know they're in the dispensation of grace, they know they're a son, they know the policy of evil is the one bringing this on them, and what they're doing is they're going around and murmuring and complaining about the fact that they're suffering with Christ. And God says, when you do that, you have completely undone that big issue that was behind everything. You say, well, how in the world does that undo the big issue? Because the truth of the matter is, when you're a level 2 son, what comes out of your mouth has a big impact on things. You know, Karen said a while ago, when you learn more, you have more responsibility. Well, you are going to learn more, and the responsibility over here, the reason you're given subtlety here and knowledge and discretion here is because you are going to be responsible for so watching what you say and watching what you do, because now you're realizing that just the words that come out of your mouth can completely destroy the main issue that God has at work here. And you're thinking, well, then what is that issue? Well, how much time I got left here? Okay, we got a few minutes.
How do you tempt Christ?
Okay, we'll talk. Okay, Bob's saying, how do you tempt Christ? Okay, by asking, no, we're going to talk. Let me take you to the references, and I'm going to show you how we do that. That's a good question. I know that's what's on your mind, but let me show you how that works. How that actually turns out that we're tempting Christ. Let me take you to Philippians. This is the book I was going to take you to a moment ago and show you these. Now, we're going to go to Philippians chapter 2, because tempting Christ, folks, is going to be, let me answer your question now just in a nutshell, and then I'll give you the verses and the details of it. Tempting Christ is succumbing to the policy of evil when it is not trying to get you to quit, but it's trying to get you to complain about what's happening with you. Because it's the sufferings of Christ when you go around saying, I'm sick and tired of this. Now you're tempting Christ. That make sense? No? Okay, let's do it like this. Let's use Bob, for example. Here's Bob, and I can make up something, but let's suppose whatever this attack is from the policy of evil, because Satan knows, let's say he's a level 2 son, because Satan knows he's not going to quit, but it knows that big issue that's sitting back there behind everything, it knows that it can undo that if it can get Bob to complain to God about the thing that's happening to him. And if Bob says to the Lord, I am so sick of this attack, see, you're going to know it's the policy of evil. It's not like you won't know where it's coming from. But when you go, I am so sick of this policy of evil, that is a statement that you make, that if you make that statement, you either A, don't know about this bigger issue for which you are suffering, or you're saying, I don't care about the big issue, I just want to quit suffering. Now this is going to make more sense as we go, so does everybody understand at least that? Okay, well just hold on. If you just got a piece of that, that's fine, because now we'll enlarge on it. Let me take you to Philippians 2, and we'll pick up some detail here. Wherefore, my beloved, as you have... By the way, why are we in Philippians? Because that's a level 2 book, right? That's the Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. Those are the books of level 2. Wherefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. You know that salvation is not talking about what? It's not talking about you're being justified, you're being saved from your sins. What does this salvation have to do? Yeah, it has to do with you successfully dealing with the policy of evil to not get you away from your sonship, your sanctified life. Now, we're going to skip you down here, skip you down, next verse. For it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure. Do all things without what? Murmurings and disputings. Why is He giving you that admonition here? Because that's the attack of the policy of evil here. The attack here is not to get you to quit, it's to get you to gripe about it.
Because he's the parent, he said so.
let me see if I can do it like this. That's a bad illustration.
I think if you gripe, you make Satan stronger because he thinks he's getting you.
Okay, Gloria says, when you gripe, it's like you're making Satan stronger because he's getting you. But the issue is more than that. The issue back here, and again, you'll see this issue in the second session, and I'm going to use the word the Bible uses here. The issue is God's cause in the midst of all of this. Now, I know that's not a word we've talked about a lot, but I'm going to show it to you in the Scripture. But God has a cause that He has dedicated Himself to, and that is the big issue here. I know you still doesn't tell you exactly what it is. But let me ask you like this. Have you not known in history men who gave their lives for a cause?
Yes.
And if you're going to give your life for a cause, what do you know about that cause as far as that guy's concerned? It's a very important issue, right?
Right.
Well, God has a cause. And that cause is going to require us to go through the sufferings of Christ. And through those sufferings, if they're rightly responded to, God's cause flourishes. If we gripe and complain about those sufferings that are putting His cause on display, you know what we're saying? The cause is not that big a deal to us. And that cause falls to the ground. Now, without telling you what that cause is yet, I've told you that much about it. But here's what I want you to see here, that's the reason there's an exhortation here that do what you're going to do without murmuring or disputing, because you're undoing, when you do that, you're undoing the big issue here. Because this is not just about you getting an education. There's really a cause that's behind all of this. So the rest of the verse, that you may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke. In other words, he's saying this is the way sons are supposed to behave in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. Here's how big a deal Paul understood this cause to be, that if you're going to go through the sufferings and you're going to gripe and complain about it, he did what he did in vain. It undid the central issue behind all of this. Now you say, well, why haven't we been told about this? Because the doctrine of that cause is not given to you until you get to level 2. But it's supposed to be given to you that way. What you really understand in level 1 is, I've been made a son, and you're oriented to sonship. You're given some doctrine and sonship establishment that adjusts your attitude to receive this education. And then you start getting educated in those decision-making skills. Those are all huge issues. They're big issues. They are. They're huge issues. And right there, a simple son is saying, that. Remember, that's why that temptation is to say, man, I got all I need. I don't need to go any further. And what God is saying is, at this point, you don't yet understand the biggest issue behind this whole thing. Because the biggest issue is not you getting an education. The biggest issue has something to do with God, not you and me. The biggest issue has something to do with what this does for our Heavenly Father, not for us. That's not to say that what's happening for us isn't important. It is. But that's not the big issue. Okay, now, 2 minutes. Let me see how far I can get us here. You know what? Maybe this is a good place to just take the break, because I only got 2 minutes left here. So we'll take the break here, and when we come back, here's what we'll do. I'm going to begin now to kind of unwrap for you what is involved in this. We know, all I need you to know up to this point is that the policy of evil, you're going to suffer under the policy of evil in level 2. Would everybody agree with that? And that policy of evil is going to change the direction in which it comes, because now it's not getting you to quit, but it can accomplish just as well what it wants to accomplish, as long as you don't fulfill that big issue that's behind it all. Okay, I'm going to try to illustrate this. This is another bad illustration, but this will send you off into the break. Why does anybody work a job? John says money.
Survival.
Survive, right? If you're going to take that to the furthest deal, if you're going to eat, if you're going to have a place to live, if you're going to survive, you've got to be able to have some type of, either somebody's got to do it for you or you've got to provide it yourself, right? All right. So if you're going to live, physically survive in the world, let's just say it this way, it's generally true, you've got to have money. And generally, how do we get that money?
Working.
All right. And you may take that money and you may invest it, or you may take that money and just spend it wait till the next paycheck. But you understand the process. That's how that works. So the only reason, at the end of the day, now I say the only reason, that's not really true for everybody that works, but the main motivator for going to work is that I can live. I can continue to survive. Now, if you're doing that for a family, you're not just doing it for yourself, but you're doing it for your loved ones as well, right? So I want to equate it like this. Working the job is what allows your family to live. Now, what if your employer quit paying you? And you still went to work every day. The big issue wasn't really going to work. The big issue was what? Feeding my family, right? Or whatever. Think of that this way. We are getting an education. It is the way this big issue gets done. But Satan found a way that even in the midst of you getting an education, it'll be like stopping the paycheck. You can still go to class, you can still get the notes, you can still get, you can go through the education, but if you'll complain about what's happening to you because you're doing that, it'll be like stopping the paycheck. The big issue, the reason you're really going to do it, is no longer now under consideration. Does that make any sense at all? You're just saying this so we'll go to the break, aren't you? All right.